Hello, listeners. Quick trigger warning on this episode for complete epistemic doubt. The possibility that nothing is real. I myself have had moments where I thought nothing was real. I've only tried mindfulness once, and I tried mindfulness, and for 30 minutes afterwards, I felt like I was watching a film and that nothing in the world was real. And I talked to a psychologist friend, and she said, yes, Steve, that's what we in the industry call a pre-psychotic episode. I said, what do I do? She said, don't do any more mindfulness. My name is Steve. I am a dad. I have children. My children ask questions. Sometimes they ask serious questions. Sometimes they ask questions knowingly to take the piss. And that's what we've got this week. I'm also a comedian, which means that when anything happens in my life, part of my brain detaches and goes, how can I make this funny later? Which is a terrific resilient skill. Listeners, welcome to Philosophy Playdate. You don't have to listen to me drone on about weird things that have happened in my life. Because in fact, I have brought with me someone who knows everything. Someone who has apparently read every piece of philosophical literature ever produced. Someone who is on first name terms with every living philosopher. And to be honest, her profile in the industry is so big that were dead philosophers to be reincarnated or to raise as zombies, she's probably the first person they would look for. Hello, Christabel, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
Which dead philosophers do you want to meet them in zombie form? And which dead philosophers don't you want to meet in zombie form? And we're assuming that they're not like brain dead zombies.
No, they're not philosophical zombies.
If we're making the comic book Philosophical Zombies, where philosophers come back to life, who do you want to come and look you up?
Okay, well, they can't be philosophical zombies.
But it's called that.
Because
that's too good a title.
Okay. Obviously, David Lewis.
Yeah, of course.
My hero. Also,
although, where would you take him, right? Because all the model shops have closed. You can't take him to Beatties or somewhere like that anymore. They don't exist anymore. There's hardly any model shops.
I feel like there were these really beautiful old trains at Alresford train station, and I would take him there because it would be like two really beautiful things from my childhood, kind of.
So what scale of train does he like? Because we know he liked model trains. Did he like full-size trains?
I think he liked full-size trains.
What about small, but you can sit on them?
Oh,
Ridgeway,
we'll have to ask Zombie.
Ridgeway Park, which is 2 miles from my house, listeners, has a model train. Not a model train, a miniature train. You can sit on it, and they have two different ones. There's a steam one and a diesel one. The reason I'm telling you the story is I mentioned it in a training session, and someone said Walt Disney visited it.
Oh!
Walt Disney was obsessed with small trains, which might explain a lot of Disneyland. He was obsessed with tiny trains that you could sit on and go around. So he went to visit Chingford in northeast London / Essex borders, specifically to go to this little park to go on the train.
That's adorable.
There are photos, Walt Disney and Ridgeway Park.
I think I would buy little train conductor outfits for us both to wear. I think that's what I would do. We would fully commit to the bit.
Any other philosophers you want to come and look you up if they come back?
Definitely Simone de Beauvoir.
Yeah.
Want to have a little chat with her.
Are you still wearing the conductor outfit for that one?
We're all wearing train conductor outfits, but we have slightly different. So like I'm LNER, David Lewis would be GWR.
But these are Halloween outfits, so you have to be sexy LNER. Lewis has to be sexy GWR. You're going to meet...
We wouldn't make Simone de Beauvoir be a sexy train conductor. That's a really bad foot to get off.
She gets a train conductor outfit, but it's just made of latex.
and then David Hume can be the sexy train.
Yeah, okay, good. Are there any philosophers that when they're reincarnated you definitely don't want them to come and find you?
So many.
Yeah, all right-wing philosophers straight away.
Yeah, I mean, like Carl Schmitt would be really bad. I feel like I could bond with Nietzsche over our shared migraine situation.
Yeah, you just don't want Nietzsche's sister,
just
the real dark philosopher.
Not the naughty lady, yeah, indeed.
She'd bring her own outfit.
Yeah, plenty of leather.
Of the Waffen SS.
Okay, as we are in like...
I'm in a weird mood, listeners. I went to a hospital this morning, and first of all, if you're ever asked to go and visit the oral medicine department, huge letdown. Because I was thinking, I have actually been quite stressed and tense recently. It's not that. I went in, I've got wisdom tooth problems. First thing the oral surgeon said to me, "You're a bit old for wisdom teeth problems." I was like, rude! You've got a poster out there that says wisdom teeth problems usually occur in your 20s, and I am in my late 20s. The other thing I've realised about me is when I'm talking to a doctor, it doesn't matter how senior they are, I have to constantly make clear to them in a friendly way that I am on their level. I don't consider myself a patient. I'm there. So anything they say, no matter how weird and offhand it is, I try and include it in a conversation. So at one point, she was checking my jaw and she said, "You've got a very small mouth." So I replied, "I'll take that as a compliment."
Okay.
I don't know how I can take it as a compliment.
I mean, I'm really thinking for you, Steve. You're going to have to help me with that. I've got a doctor's appointment coming up and I want them to take me seriously.
Have you tried being a man in his late 20s?
Should I bring a man?
Have you tried? No, what you really need to do is get your PhD in and get doctor in front of your name. I've told the story about how it speeds up my appointments.
But then I'll be so disappointed that it's philosophy.
What? They're not disappointed at all. A lot of doctors don't, especially if you go see a GP, they don't have a doctorate. Doctor is an honorary title for many doctors. They do a 2-year GP course. They don't have MD.
Oh. Well, neither do I. But they don't know that. Let's just put the doctor in front. What was happening when...
I'm not putting doctor in front. I'm putting professor in front.
Yeah, true, indeed. What was happening when... Was it your daughter that asked you this?
Yeah. So today's question, listeners, is...
Is it true that when you fall asleep, the world explodes and when you wake up, it comes back together?
Yeah. So she was intentionally asking me silly questions, like on purpose.
Was this just before
whether
bedtime?
We would bite on any of them. No, we were watching Gumball, which is a completely incoherent kids show. It's really enjoyable, listeners, even if you're an adult. It's very fun to watch. It is super postmodern. It has there are characters in it who have their own animation styles. So some characters are shown as like filmed objects. One character is just the bottom half of a real human face with googly eyes stuck on the chin. There are some characters who are 2-dimensional, some are 3-dimensional, some are black and white. It's a great show, but it is... I'm going to say, is inchoate a word that I'm looking for? We were watching that and she was just asking me weird, random things. And I thought I'd pull that one out because I thought this is a thing that is like a comedy trope. When my daughter asked me, I immediately remembered 30 Rock, where Tracy Morgan, the completely disconnected from reality comedian, says to somebody in a conversation, "I'm Tracy Jordan. Nothing happens when I go to sleep." Meaning like the whole world stops and he's the only character. So I thought it'd be fun. And just because I realised there's a lot of people talking about main character syndrome. And I thought it'd be good, maybe we could think about that.
It's an easy thing to fall prey to. Whenever I go back to Oxford and I see people wearing the school uniform of the school that I went to.
Clang listeners.
Really? Okay, well...
I went to Oxford, a school in Oxford.
A school in Oxford! Yeah, come on, it's not that impressive. But I always think like, oh, they're still doing that? That's still going on? I've left. Why would they... Oh, yeah, I guess that's still a thing. It's very easy. It's a very easy thing to think.
I did refuse to go to my school reunion recently.
I went to both, 5 and 10.
You must have had a better experience at school than I did. Main character syndrome. Do you have main character syndrome? I absolutely don't. I have supporting character syndrome.
I think you could. I think you should, but you don't. I think there's no sort of reason for me to, and yet... I don't know, it's very easy to get navel-gazy, isn't it? And it's very easy to kind of forget that things just tick along when you're not there. But I'm going to give you some ontological preliminaries to ground us before
Can I give you an ADHD trait?
Yes, please.
So one of the things about ADHD friendships is that when I see someone and then I see them again, regardless of the gap, I just assume that nothing has changed in our friendship. So if I'm your friend and I don't see you for 10 years and you sit down, I will start talking to you exactly the level of familiarity and intimacy we had last time we talked.
That is elite friendship behaviour. That's what I want.
Yeah, but that can really throw people off when they're like, whoa, we've both had kids in this entire period. We're living totally different lives. Why are you still talking about it? It's like, well, because, and it's also one of the things is though, it means I'm very bad at constantly messaging people and doing that neurotypical work of keeping friendship alive, because neurodivergent people our friendships are alive, whether we send all those messages or not, and we see each other and we're immediately back where we were. As neurotypicals are like, well, actually, you forgot my birthday 6 years ago and you didn't send me what? I'm sorry, did you set me some sort of clever
Admin
friendship
work.
trap and I've fallen into it? I thought friendship was a thing we should try and increase in the world, not find. Anyway.
Very utilitarian of you.
Listeners, if you are neurotypical, go get some therapy. But don't get neurotypical therapy. You need to go and get neurodivergent therapy, where someone with ADHD or autism just sits you down and just tells you all the things you're doing wrong.
Remember that I've talked a lot about your ontology, your list of things that you think exist.
Yeah.
And remember from I think lots of different episodes, what we're going for is something called parsimony, simplicity in our ontology, right? But simplicity, as I think we covered in, I can't remember what episode it was, but simplicity seems to come in kind of two different flavors, right? We could talk about the number of things overall.
Yep.
That would be quantitative parsimony. Or we could talk about the different fundamental kinds that those things fall under.
Yep.
That's qualitative parsimony.
So are there 8 billion people, or are there really just the same 12 people cut and pasted over and over and over again?
Well, that's what Weber thinks, doesn't he? Exactly. There are just 5 guys, and you
That's
just
what
got
Myers and Briggs think. There's just 16 people walking around.
Exactly. Well, yeah, like very qualitatively parsimonious. And look, the universe could be a really big place, but maybe the number of really like fundamental categories is kind of few. So say we want to be qualitatively parsimonious in our ontology. Well, one of the most qualitatively parsimonious theories is going to be a monism, a theory where there's only one kind of thing. An example of a monism would be materialism. Everything is made out of matter. There's another kind of monism that I want to talk about later in the episode. That's idealism. Everything is ideas. And then you have dualisms, which kind of, for example, Cartesian dualism says, well, everything in the universe falls under 2 fundamental categories. They're either material bodies, like matter, or res cogitans, thinking things.
Ooh.
And thinking things are either people or God. So.
Although apparently UK law has been amended recently, and legally now, listeners, yes, I was at a talk about replacing animals in environmental research this week. Crabs and octopuses are now considered sentient under British law, although the research law hasn't been updated to reflect this yet. So you now, if you have a pet octopus, you can't feed it live crabs in the UK anymore. They're now considered sentient.
Oh,
just updating, because a few episodes back I said the law doesn't care what you do with anything that doesn't have a backbone. Well, some things without a backbone are crossing the line now.
Indeed.
So thinking things now includes crabs.
Okay. Res cogitans. Descartes wouldn't have thought so, but, maybe he wasn't working with as much.
Descartes comes back as a zombie. Do you want to hang out?
Yeah.
100%.
Oh, yeah,
100%.
for sure. I mean, we take the piss out of him for the whole pineal gland thing. Oh, the gateway to the soul is the pineal gland. I think he would have a good sense of humor. Well, actually, no, because after the meditations, if you get... I think any sort of recently published version, you get his responses. So people had sent in criticisms and he responds to them, and he gets so salty about them. It's actually a really fun read. He's not quite saying everyone else is stupid apart from me, and they're making stupid comments that they shouldn't have made, but it's almost that.
Yeah, he's the honey badger coming back. Listeners, if you ever go to the Royal Society, go find the portrait of Descartes. He's the only person who looks like he was having fun when he had his portrait done. Everyone else, room full of very grumpy people. Descartes, he's doing a fun little
he's a bit jovial.
sexy smile with a little joviality in it. I was there with somebody who I won't name, who did walk past Descartes and go, would, very loudly.
Oh, I can't think of Descartes as a sexual being. I'm sorry. It's kind of like thinking about your parents as sexual beings. It's just not in my capability.
Yeah.
Descartes. Anyway, but glad that he was a handsome chap. Okay.
Listeners, if you want to email in pictures of your parents to see if Christabel and I can envisage them as sexual beings, don't.
When we have to do a filler episode where
if we ever want to do that, we'll go and find your parents on Instagram. You don't need to send us pictures.
Okay, So why am I telling you about monisms and dualisms? Well, it relates back to the question because depending on what your ontology is, the cogency of the question kind of changes, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to start with the ontologies that are committed to the existence of matter, so materialism and dualism. If you are one of those, it's going to be quite difficult to say that all of matter explodes and then reforms in this way that like nobody experiences any knock-on effects. Surely if all of matter exploded, there would be a huge gravitational impact. Nobody observes that. Nobody observes the world reforming. Does this happen when anyone goes to sleep? Well, in that case, for any geologically recent time, someone has been awake to observe the world. Do the laws of physics stop working as soon as you fall asleep?
Plus you get in Toy Story, the toys all run around and then they have to make sure they rearrange themselves back to where they were when the kid walks back in. You've got that, but you've got it on like an infinite atomic scale. Everything's gone boom, and my daughter is just starting to stir, and there's like all these atoms of various, I'll say, tables for you.
Thank you.
Have to suddenly all sort themselves back to where they were, and that is a lot of jostling and a lot of like, you were over there, get back here, what are you, come on.
Oh, and you're giving them panpsychism now. They're all conscious atoms as well.
Yeah, take that, Descartes. All atoms are now thinking beings in my headcanon.
Steve slipped into Spinoza, and that's fine. That's good. I think in the metaphysics episodes.
Wait, I need to see a portrait of Spinoza before I decide whether I'm slipping into Spinoza or not.
I think long
Descartes,
hair.
fine. That's not enough. They need a certain je ne sais quoi.
He turned down a big inheritance to go and grind lenses.
And grind my lenses anytime. Stop it, Steve. I told you, listeners, I'm in a weird mood. Went to hospital.
Really are. He's
well,
got
because
it on
when you're
him.
in hospital, all the time, you are like, go here, do that, move to that, go to that waiting room, go to that waiting room, do that thing, answer these questions seriously. It's very hard for me to do that for 2 hours. So all the pent-up chaos comes out for the rest of the day.
Okay, we're no longer on our best behavior here. Okay, but it's not a simple theory, right? To say that you've got two laws, I guess, or two sets of laws. One for when matter is being observed and it behaves in these incredibly regular ways, and one for when it's not being observed and it behaves in these unpredictable, strange, and also completely unknowable ways.
Schrodinger's cat wants a word.
Yeah, well,
because it absolutely does, doesn't it? Behaves in an unknowable way till you look at it. And then it behaves in one of two knowable ways.
Good, because now we've put observation into our scientific posits, and maybe this is actually the case. Let's stay in Newtonian physics for a minute, though. But you're absolutely right. I
did once want to make a comic strip where Schrodinger's cat and Pavlov's dog were friends.
Oh,
and Pavlov's dog would have a completely inappropriate reaction to a basic stimulus, get them both in trouble, try and blame Schrodinger's cat. And whenever someone stormed in and was like, "Who trashed this kitchen?" Pavlov's dog would go, "It was Schrodinger's cat," but Schrodinger's cat would just be dead. Same punchline every time. The cat is just suddenly dead for no reason, and the dog gets in trouble.
I like that. I like predictable, formulaic. I know exactly what I'm going to get. It's served to me every time.
So we got two states.
So, yeah.
Like, we don't even know what colour Schrodinger's cat was. We don't know what its personality was like.
True. It was probably like all cats, aloof and kind of, that's why I put it in the box, I suppose. Anyway.
Stop scratching my furniture. Get in this box. Meow. What's connected to the box? Meow. Nothing.
But okay. Say that we've got two theories. We've got this world exploding theory and we've got the stable world theory. The kinds of explanations that we're going to give for everyday things are going to be completely different. So like, look at this table. I love talking about tables. That's my métier. I can only talk about tables. But you could ask, why is it here? And then there's a really simple response in the stable world theory. It's just like, oh, because somebody put it there.
We put it here.
We
moved
indeed
it
did
earlier.
Move it a little bit earlier, right? And if you wanted to give a longer story, you could say, well, somebody made it and then Steve bought it and then Steve bought it into his kitchen, and it's not moved very much since then. But according to the world exploding theory, you're going to have to say that the chair is there because somebody woke up, which meant that the world had to coalesce again, and for some reason that we're not entirely sure of, it coalesced in just the way that it was when it was last seen? And is it the same table that comes back every time your daughter wakes back up? Or do we have a series of qualitative duplicates? And if so, like, you know, where do they come from? It's going to be so much more
so not just
complicated.
I am a new person every morning, but this is an entire new universe every morning.
Could be. Okay, here is...
That's not very parsimonious, is it?
It's not very parsimonious.
I've already
at
given you
all.
infinite universes, and now you want infinite universes within the infinite universes.
Have I talked to you about the vase of flowers thought experiment? I think it
No.
comes from Robert Nozick, terrible political theorist,
He's
really
dead.
good.
We don't know whether he's coming back as a zombie or not, listeners.
If he's coming back to as a zombie, he doesn't get a train conductor uniform.
No.
Most people know him because of his libertarian philosophy. I know him because of his metaphysics, and I think that his metaphysics is actually really good. I think he should have stuck with the metaphysics, or maybe he only did the metaphysics afterwards. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Say on one side of the table we have a disappearing machine, and the other side of the table we have an appearing machine.
Yep.
And in the middle of the table we have a vase of flowers. And say I set up the disappearing machine to be such that as soon as something appears in the middle of the table, it disappears it.
Yep.
But I set up the appearing machine in such a way that as soon as it sees a space in the middle of the table, it appears a vase of flowers.
Yep.
And the vase of flowers changes ever so slightly such that it wilts like a normal vase of flowers would wilt in real time.
Okay.
So if you were just looking at it and you didn't know, and so you were looking at it for ages and ages and ages, you would be able to see it wilt as if it was just
Like normal, yeah.
Would you say that there are lots of vases of flowers on the table, or a single vase of flowers that keeps getting appeared and disappeared?
I think there's a single vase of flowers with more steps.
Yes.
It's
okay.
a very complicated way of having a normal vase of flowers.
It's a very complicated way of having a normal vase of flowers. It's not a very parsimonious.
I mean, one of the
explanation,
things I
but
make
it's
is videos for people. And sometimes you shoot at 16 frames per second, and sometimes you shoot at 30 frames per second, and I know that what I've got for that second is 60 still images or 120 still images. But no client emails me and goes, thank you for these 2,400 still images. They go, thank you for these 40 seconds of video. It's one thing.
So, yes, that's a really good analogy. In fact, Nozick himself calls it film strip continuity.
Yes.
Like, is film strip continuity enough to have like a single persisting ordinary object?
Although he's dating himself with that. He should have gone for zoetrope continuity.
Oh.
He would have sounded much more philosophically grounded in history.
Well, you're right, because whenever I explain this to my undergraduate students, I like draw a little picture of, you know, a film, like with the negative as well, the negative thought experiment for time travel. You've got to assume that your students know about these like analog bits of technology, and then if they don't, then you have to spend 20 minutes explaining like,
No, but then they've
actually a
learned
negative
something.
is this.
They've learned something.
They've learned something anyway, because you're teaching them philosophy, Steve.
Because they go and they have dinner with people, and the people they don't want to hear their deep philosophical things, but they're like, do you know how they used to make moving pictures? How? Well. Oh, that's interesting. Thanks for telling me that.
That's actually so true. If I start talking philosophy at a party, I can kind of like visually register the disappointment on other people's faces. Like, oh no, settle in.
I was trying to work out what philosophy hell is for the philosophers we don't like, who we don't want to be reincarnated and hang out with. And I thought all it is it's a symposium where other philosophers are at the front talking, and there's no Q&A.
There's no Q&A.
So they don't get to nitpick the other person's philosophy at any point. But now I've realised that's everybody's hell.
yeah. To be honest, Q&A is my hell. I find Q&A quite hard. I'm getting better at it.
I would never take part in a philosophy Q&A. I love Q&As in things I know about, because I always whack my hand straight up at the beginning.
Do you?
Yeah. But then I softball question.
Oh, Steve, you angel.
Because what
yes.
I'm trying to do is set the tone for the whole of the rest of the Q&A. So if I really nice softball question, you get to show off that you're clever in a way that is just outside what your presentation was about, then the next person is much less likely to put their hand up and do a dickhead question.
Because they look like a real arsehole.
Whereas if the first one is a dickhead question, the next person wants to one-up the dickhead question.
Yeah.
So on. Also, I read a psychology paper a few years back. At a Q&A, if you have a group of people of varied genders, if the first question you take is from somebody who presents as a man, you will get most of your remaining questions will be from people who present as men. If you intentionally, if a bunch of hands go up as the host or the chair or whatever, and you intentionally take a question from somebody who presents feminine, then you'll get a much more balanced set of questions afterwards.
That's very interesting.
It does involve having to make guesses about people's genders, which is not good to do on an individual basis, but it's a useful trick if you're ever chairing a Q&A.
I do favour the women whenever I'm chairing.
And don't say, I'm taking my first question from a woman. Don't gender your audience, but just go from the most woman presenting person you can find who's got their hand up.
Wise words from Steve. Wise words indeed.
I think that was, I can't remember who did it, University of Toronto, I think they were at. Anyway.
So to go back to these different styles of explanation, okay, you might say something like, well, one is a little bit more of an unwieldy kind of explanation for how things get to the places that they are. But maybe the universe is really complicated and unwieldy. So what? Well, you could actually respond, well, according to the world exploding theory, the sorts of explanations that you're going to give are not just unwieldy, but they don't actually make sense.
Yeah.
So according to some theories of what makes a good explanation, you can't even pass saying something like, oh, well, when I look away, things disappear.
Yeah.
Take verificationism. Have you heard of logical empiricism?
I've heard those words.
It gets talked about. It's not sort of fashionable anymore. It's this kind of philosophical movement that flourishes in, I think it's sort of the 20s and 30s in Europe, and then a little bit later in the USA, maybe the 40s and 50s.
So backward.
Yeah, true. As I say, unpopular now, but it had this real moment. A.J. Ayer was one of the kind of commitments that they're regularly associated with is this verification principle, and it's this idea that a sentence only has meaning if it can be verified, or A.J. Ayer said if it can be in principle verified.
Right.
So I could say something like, you used the coffee machine 10 minutes ago, but it's still hot. Well, imagine that we'd both left the house and nobody in the vicinity had a house key. Well, it could still be in principle verified. Maybe someone could break in or something.
Yeah.
So it's a meaningful statement. Compare this to statements about the existence of God or moral properties or teeny tiny particles that don't have any causal interaction that we can observe.
Yeah.
Like if I was to say something like, actually, you don't know this, Steve, but the world is absolutely saturated with these tiny particles called blorons, and they don't interact with any observable matter, and they don't interact with each other in a way that we can see. But trust me, they're there.
Listeners, if you want to start the bloron conspiracy, I'm in. Right?
What colour are they? I suppose they're so small they can't be a colour.
These are all going to be open to the community when we all come together. Because what do we all lack in the 21st century? Community.
Also
Bloron
sense of
conspiracy.
magic.
Sense of magic, yeah.
Sense of wonder.
Part of our rites is going to be confession, but you confess to the blorons. So you can do it on your own. You don't confess to another human. You just confess.
That's really
And the
beautiful.
blorons always hear you, listeners.
Because they're always there. They're always there. But you can't test the blorons.
They're ineffable. Why would you want to test them?
They don't do their thing if you're testing them, right?
We're very faith-based. My conspiracy.
Indeed. Well, A.J. Ayer and co. would say that any statement involving blorons not only is sort of bad or unwieldy, but it's just not meaningful. And this bleeds into other areas of philosophy in, I think, a really interesting way, because I can check whether something is positively or negatively charged. I was looking this up last night. I can use an electroscope.
Yeah.
Or I could check whether something's radioactive or not. I could use a Geiger counter. But I can't check whether an action is right or wrong in the same way. I can't do a scientific experiment that would tell me in a purely non-subjective way whether what has just gone on is either permissible or impermissible.
Is this why they came up with this philosophy? That's what they're heading towards, is
Yeah.
extreme moral relativism.
Well-
I've invented this new school of logic, which means I am allowed to steal that curly-whirly.
Well, yeah, amoralism, there's no such thing.
Yeah.
So they're quite famous for saying that statements like stealing is wrong are just the same as just writing stealing with a load of exclamation points afterwards. All you're doing when you're talking about, according to the logical empiricists, when you're saying like, oh, that was a bad thing to do, or that was the right thing to do, is you're just kind of like expressing a sentiment. It's no more meaningful than that. So like, imagine we were having a moral debate about like whether or not lying is wrong.
Yeah.
If you were to say lying is wrong, it's just kind of like you're saying it in a disapproving voice. You're saying like lying. And then if I was to be like, no, lying is right, maybe I'd be saying it in a more even-handed voice. And that's what all ethical debates kind of devolve into, according to the logical empiricists. It's a very sort of absurd kind of movement, if you really think about it. They wouldn't like me saying that, but it turns a lot of ethical debate into just like performance art, I guess.
Yeah, I think if immediately your philosophy tips over into, I can do whatever I want, you fucked the basic job of philosophy.
Well, okay.
Haven't you?
I mean, I think people agree with that now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very much gone out of fashion.
Did you refute it thus by just punching them in the face?
To be honest, I think a lot of people in the Vienna circle who were like logical empiricists working on the verification principle might have been punched in the face quite a lot. Maybe either as like young people or as mid-career philosophers. Yeah, I really see that for this movement, actually. Also,
that hurt. I'm sorry, I've got no way of verifying that it hurt.
Exactly, because we know from the What Is It Like to Be a Dog episode that I can't have direct introspective access to your feelings. So if you make any statements about your feelings, I can't verify them.
Yeah.
Here's another really short way that you could contend with the verificationist. You could say, well, does the verification principle make sense? Because can I verify that it's the case that a statement is only meaningful if I can verify it? No,
because the coffee machine might be hot because after we left the house, someone else went in, made a cup of coffee, and it's hot from that.
Maybe.
So the statement, you used the coffee machine 10 minutes ago, so it's still hot, I can verify it. No, you can't. You're not in control of all the variables in the middle.
I'm certainly not. Also, I could have looked away and the universe could have exploded just behind my back, just behind my field of vision.
This is good. This is a new one for our laws of philosophy. We're getting towards always like what I am starting to call Keynesianism. It might be called Playdateanism, a whole school of philosophical thinking. We know our number one rule of philosophy is don't die.
Yes.
Because then people can refute your work and you can't stop them. And we've got the new one, which is if your philosophy immediately logically creates the ability for me to punch you in the face and you can't say I did something wrong, that's not good philosophy.
Okay. That's very fair. I mean, it's kind of worth noting that this last way to deal with the verificationist kind of goes against a sort of personal rule that I have, which is...
Don't punch philosophers. Is that a personal rule?
That's not one of my personal rules.
We'll call it the Tyson test.
Okay.
It's a way of testing all philosophy.
I guess mine is this sort of like one sentence arsehole test. Okay, so you know that Socrates says, the only thing that I know is that I know nothing.
Yeah, except he knows the word no, the word nothing, the word I.
Well, you just say, well, you do know something then. Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of like being a one sentence arsehole. You're not really taking the true meaning of what he's saying into account. And I think... oh, but can you verify the verification principle? Is also being a one sentence asshole. But I kind of feel like it's against the verificationists. Maybe we're allowed one.
You're allowed to use somebody's own tools against them.
Yeah, I think,
because in doing so, you are taking their philosophy seriously and you are judging it by its own criteria.
Well, somebody presented an argument the other day that composition never occurs. So like, I can't put two things together and make a whole thing, a third thing. Like if I have...
green paint would like a word.
Yeah, I mean, paint is a good example. Like I paint something and then I create like a painted thing. Anyway, he presented an argument in premise, conclusion format. And it's like, well, if composition doesn't occur and you've got these individual parts of the argument, you know? Why? Anyway.
Physician, heal thyself. Remove the plank from your own eye before you remove the chip from my eye.
And I hate to be a one sentence asshole, but anyway.
How much of philosophy conferences is just people putting their hand up and then basically saying, you're a dick?
Oh, if you listen hard enough, so much of it. If you want to know how to ask good questions at a philosophy conference, though, there's a really fantastic blog post by Josh Parsons, and he talks about how to ask the arsehole question but turned in on itself. So you're actually trying to sort of construct someone's theory kind of from the outside. It's a really deft thing to be able to do, but it's really impressive because you can both gain, oh, they're really smart, they clearly understood the talk, and they're clearly thinking about strengths and weaknesses, right? But you're also helping the speaker, like, oh, you know, how I could see that this might be a criticism, but you would respond something like this, am I right? Something like that. It's more deft than that.
Listeners, if you're at a philosophy conference and Christabel is giving a talk, here's your first question. Christabel, how are you so great? Or if you want to use longer words, Christabel, how do you handle the expectations that come with your immense intellect?
I kind of take compliments badly, though, so I'll probably just like
That's
ride
not a compliment,
around on the
it's
floor.
a question.
Okay.
They're asking for life advice.
Okay. Okay, also, because I work at the LSE, I feel contractually obliged to mention Karl Popper.
Yeah, I thought you were about to say contractually obliged to say something really right-wing.
No. Karl Popper has a falsification principle.
Inventor of poppers, listeners.
Oh yeah, we have mentioned him on the podcast before. Now, he said that being verifiable can't be the gold standard for explanations because quite a lot of scientific explanations come up with sort of claims that actually can't be verified.
Yeah.
So a lot of claims that are made in useful theories and scientific theories, kind of other theories, economic theories, whatever, they take this form. All the F's are G's. So, for example, like all matter attracts other matter, all swans are white, or like all helium has 2 protons. All of the things that fall under a certain category have a certain property.
Yep.
Now,
Every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
Indeed. And those sorts of constructions are really helpful. They aid us in understanding the world around us by helping us to kind of make these cogent, meaningful theories that are genuinely informative.
Yep.
But they're not even in principle verifiable, if you think about it. Because it's not clear that I could even in principle look at all of the helium atoms or all of the matter to check that it attracts all other matter. It's not even clear that I could in principle look at all of the swans.
Nope.
Because say I spend my whole life looking for swans. Well, every swan sighting only makes it a little bit more probable that all swans are white. And there's an asymmetry here, right? Because if I was to see one non-white swan, my theory is completely done, right? So
you'd have to define a swan as well.
You'd have to define a swan.
I have a theory that all birds are the same species. Like, because you've got your pigeon, which is your default bird. If you get it wet, if it's a wet pigeon, it's a duck.
It's a duck.
If it's a big wet pigeon, it's a goose. And then if it's a big wet pigeon, but it's also a Tory, it's a swan. They're just Tory geese, listeners.
What's an ostrich?
It's just a really stretched
It's just a really
pigeon.
stretched pigeon with
Giraffe.
hench legs.
Giraffe's just a stretched horse. It's all the same thing.
That's true.
No. Well, I would present as evidence all dogs are the same species, right?
They
but
are.
Morphologically incredibly variable, almost as much as birds. So therefore, all birds are the same species.
Aristotle wants a word. Aristotle wants to have a look at some essences. He is excited by what you are saying.
Yeah. I'm taking, the morphologists are like, yes. People who say things like, and, what was I watching one this week? It was like hamsters or something. They're like, hamsters haven't evolved. It wasn't hamsters. It was something like hamsters. Hamsters haven't evolved for 300 million years. I was like, morphologically, they haven't. I bet you they've got a completely different immune system. I bet they... Anyway.
I wasn't sure where you were going with this. I was thinking sort of cognitively.
No,
but
it's just the geneticist in me. I get annoyed when people say something hasn't evolved for a very long time on purely morphological data. When in fact it has evolved massively. It just hasn't changed its form because, e.g., it's a crab or a crocodile and its form is perfect.
I see.
Crocodiles have evolved loads.
Is that what it's called? Cancerization? Everything tends towards being a crab?
Crabs, yeah. Tanks are the example of warfare tending towards crabs.
Crabs. Yes, you're so right. You're so right. Also, I love learning about gripes that have nothing to do with my discipline because it makes me realize that all of the gripes that we have in my specific subdiscipline are just as silly as the gripe that I have just heard. And I think that's really helpful for me. It's so helpful, I think, for philosophers to teach undergraduates. And honestly, like anyone new to philosophy, it's because you read so much philosophy that all of your intuitions become completely worthless.
Yeah.
Because you're so used to countenancing counterintuitive things that it's like, oh, do you think this law could be true? I have no idea. I'm completely confused. I don't have a gut that is at all helpful anymore.
So wait, have you trained yourself out of having an opinion on most philosophy? I know in your philosophy you're like, there absolutely are infinite worlds and whatever. If we're talking materialism versus idealism...
Let me give you an example.
Are you a both sidesist?
No. Let me give you an example from a recent class that I've taught. It was on modal logic.
Yeah.
So the logic of possibility. And here's one theorem. Mm-hmm. If something is possibly true, it's necessarily true that it's possibly true. It couldn't have been the case that it was impossible. And that's a principle. It's called the S5 principle.
Did you say if something's possibly true, then it's possibly true? But
no,
with more
I said.
Words.
well,
you said,
according to this
if
principle,
something's
yes.
possibly true, then it's not impossible. That's the same as if something's not impossible, it's possible. Isn't it? I don't get it.
If something's possibly true, then it's necessarily true that it's possibly true.
Right.
So
if something's possibly true, then it's possibly true. That's what you're saying.
Well, so the S5 modal logician would have you think. I think it's true.
I'm a great believer in simplifying equations.
Well, okay. But
that's dividing by 1. We can cross that bit out.
To say that something's necessarily true is meaningful, right? Like, it's true that the kitchen table is on this side of the kitchen, but it's not necessarily true because it could have been on the other side.
Yeah.
It's possible that the kitchen could have been in the living room area. So does that mean it's necessarily true that it's possible? Yeah. So in that case, you would disagree with the S5 theorem. But
no, I'm not disagreeing with it. I just think it's not useful. I think it's saying the same thing with more words. You were building to something that was much more important than me wanting to get down a philosophy textbook and cross half of it out.
Well, it's just, okay, so there are lots of different multiple parallel universes where Superman is. Yeah. Are we able to think of all of them as possible? If so, S5 is true. If not, S5 is not true. We're in a non-Superman universe, and let's say that there are like 5...
That we know of.
That we know of, thank you.
He might be a kid in a field in Kansas right now. We don't know which of the timelines we're in.
True, we might be in the first coming.
He hasn't even landed yet. Yeah, we don't know.
Exciting stuff. But there are lots of other universes where Superman exists.
Yeah.
Now, those universes are possible according to our universe. We can tell stories about them that make sense. But in some of those universes, would they think that those other universes would also be possible? Would they be able to access other possibilities that we wouldn't think are possible here? Okay, so imagine that you have Descartes lives for, let's say, 58 years in the real world.
Yeah.
In the actual world, sorry. David Lewis wouldn't like me saying that the actual world is the same as the real world because he thinks
all worlds are actual. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, good. But we think that it's possible that he could have lived for a bit longer.
Yeah.
People do live for a bit longer than, I think I said 58. So maybe there's a possible world where he lives to 64. And they say, well, it's possible that he could have lived for a longer amount of time. Well, in that case, there's a possible world where he lives to 75. They say the same thing. And let's say that there's a chain of worlds up to a situation where there's a possible world with a Descartes and he dies, and they say, well, he could have lived longer. He could have lived to 200 years. Now, according to this possible world, people don't live 200 years. So if you were to say something like Descartes could have lived to 200 years, I would say, no, that's false. In that case, that means that we can't access as a possibility that possible world where he lives to 200 years.
But I've got infinite worlds to play with, so I can come up with loads of ways that he could have lived 200 years.
Good. I think that probably means that you do endorse the truth of S5.
Yeah. It's possible. Is my belief. Yeah.
Yeah. So could we conceive of all possible worlds as possible, or are there some worlds that, like, we call them inaccessible? If we could conceive of all possible worlds as possible from any vantage point, from any possible world, then you think that S5 is true. If you don't, then you think that S5 is false. Well, we can do another episode.
I'm very imaginative, right? So the me in every possible world can imagine literally anything. I've absorbed a lot of sci-fi. A lot of superhero comics existence. No, I can imagine pretty much anything.
Maybe that's one of your necessary properties, that you're both conscious and extremely imaginative.
Thank you.
Maybe it's part of your essence.
Yes, yes.
I agree for what it's worth, but I have a shortened version of this conversation about this rule and lots of other different principles in modal logic with the students. And I think at the very beginning, you can sort of have intuitions about those particular laws. Like there's the K rule, for example.
The K rule, listeners, is don't do K. It's bad for you.
Yeah, actually, that's...
official podcast position.
Yeah, I think so.
Don't mess with K.
But the K rule is, if you have a necessary conditional, if the antecedent is necessarily true, then the consequent is necessarily true. So if it's necessarily true that if you have twins, you're a father of more than one, then if necessarily you're a father of twins, then necessarily you're a father of more than one.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty intuitive, right? Like, it's pretty obvious that it's true. But then
it is one of those bits of philosophy where it just sounds like saying the same thing in different words.
A lot of logic is that, because you're working out things that are like tautologically.
Tautological.
Thank you.
Tautologically.
Steve, I think you have to take
Tortellini.
You're working out
How
all
do
of
you
these
like your tortellini?
I like it tautologous. So with a lot of logic, you're working out these things.
I've brought you some semola flour mixed with water and or eggs and extruded into long, thin ribbons. I call it tortellini. That's tautology.
Thanks. I've really not known where you've been going with a lot of this today. I like Back from the Hospital, Steve. You're really keeping me on my toes. But yeah, lots of logic sounds like you're just saying really obvious stuff because you're just trying to find the fundamental. You're trying to grind down to the fundamental truths. Oh yeah.
Just saying 2 is the same as the whole number between 1 and 3. Give me a doctorate. Sorry, listeners, I'm distracted by a starling eating a whole cherry just outside the window.
Oh, good. I'm glad that it's munching it up. But there's a whole philosophy book. I think it's called Principia Mathematica, where the first chapter is just 1 + 1 = 2. But they solve it. They prove it in the 6th realm. Logic is great, and it's really important. But yes, a lot of the time it does sound like you're just saying something that is painfully obvious because you're trying to drill down to a fundamental truth. Yeah. Let's go back to Blorons.
Blorons, yeah. Oh, mighty Blorons. You are omnipresent.
Yes, indeed. But not only can I not prove the existence of Blorons, I can't verify them, but I also can't prove that they don't exist. They're unfalsifiable. Yeah. So that's how Karl Popper would say, okay, none of the statements that you make that mention Blorons are indeed meaningful. That's what makes it a bad theory, according to Karl Popper. Yeah. Of course, not according to us, because we have now understood the truth of the way of Blorons. But we'd also rub up against this kind of falsification problem if we posited that if we go to sleep, the world explodes, just to reform as soon as we're capable of consciously observing it again. Mm-hmm. Because that's not verifiable. It's also not falsifiable because the whole posit, by its very nature, you don't notice it happening. Yep. Right? And that's where the rub is for
And
Popper.
You can't be asleep and awake.
You can't.
You'd have to be awake to verify or to falsify
exactly
while you were asleep.
Exactly.
Listeners, I know there's lots of weird in-betweeny states, but this isn't about the in-betweeny states. It's about I go to sleep.
Yeah, but also in the in-betweeny states, I don't think you're capable of verifying very much. I talk in my sleep, not a lot, but a fair amount, and I'm often in the sort of, because my partner goes to bed after me and we have these whole conversations that I don't really remember and that he says don't really make sense. Oh, nonsense. Okay. Nonsense. But it's because I'm having conversations in my dream, and then he says that he'll come to bed, and then I'll start talking to him as if we've been talking for the last 30 minutes, and I'm just in full flow.
And you're just like, Descartes, of course, I'd love another croissant.
Yeah,
where have all your clothes gone, René Descartes? Is that Spinoza?
I had a dream about you the other day, Steve. We were gold prospectors. I don't know what that means.
Gold?
Gold prospectors, like in
Jung
frontier
will
times.
tell you that the gold that we are prospecting for is the truth.
Yes.
And the prospecting is this podcast. And what we do is we dig through all the dirt of all of the great philosophy.
We
and
sift through arguments.
We flow the water of your intellect across the top of it. And we prospect for the truth. Listeners, for the record, Jung is bollocks, but I'm just using it for that.
Yeah. Dreams have got to be explained somehow, and you might as well reach for that.
Do you sleepwalk?
I have, but not very often, like less than 5 times.
Many years ago, I was staying in my then girlfriend's parents' house with her. I didn't go and visit them without her. That would be weird. We're all adults in this scenario. Her dad sleepwalks. Her dad also sleeps naked.
Oh, no.
And I did awaken in the middle of the night to what I'm going to say. Very impressive.
Oh, well, at least he's giving you a show.
I remember the next morning having breakfast with her mum, and it was really hard to not say, you must be thoroughly satisfied, girlfriend's mum.
Well.
Listeners, just to give you the full perspective, at the moment I awoke, under a foot away from my face.
right
this
at
wasn't,
the level.
This wasn't from a distance. We are talking full, like you could, if you were a doctor, you could diagnose from the distance. I was viewing.
Prime time, front row seat.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move away from the existence of matter. Let's go into idealism.
Let's move away from my last story.
Well, I was thinking, let's flush all of this away. Let's move into a completely different ontological posit. I think we've sort of covered, if you are committed to the existence of matter, you're going to make your theory so much more complicated by accepting this posit that the world explodes when you fall asleep and it reforms when you wake back up. But there might be an ontology where the posit is actually going to make your theory simpler. Let's think about these non-materialistic ontologies.
Yeah.
Enter Bishop George Berkeley.
Yeah, he's moving diagonally.
Indeed.
Into the conversation.
He is. Irish guy, Bishop of Cloyne. Big fan of tar water. Actually, no, I'll tell you about his...
He's not got the best church title, though, has he? I was in a cathedral and they have seats for all of the members of the local diocese, like all the vicars of things. And there was a seat labelled, I think this is Exeter Cathedral, the Prebendary of Wetwang. And that is my favourite member of any church. Imagine introducing yourself. Hello, yes, I'm David. I'm the Prebendary of Wetwang.
What do you have to do? What do you have to do to gain this honour?
I mean, believe in the Protestant God is probably step one, which might be a bit hard for some philosophers.
I think a lot of bishops don't do that. I'm going to focus on Berkeley because he's not the only idealist, but he is an idealist. And the way that he goes about his idealism is kind of beating the verificationists
Can
at
you
their
be a
own
Christian idealist?
game.
God created everything, and by everything I mean nothing.
I'm going
Just
to tell
ideas.
you exactly how you can be a Christian idealist. I think he has a really beautiful theory. I don't think
It reduces the Christian God to making the Matrix, doesn't it?
That's exactly what he does, actually.
Okay.
That's exactly... Oh, yeah.
That disempowers the omnipotent deity somewhat.
I mean, God is doing quite a lot of what. I don't want to spoil it for you.
Yeah, let's fly back to Cloyne.
Let's fly back to Cloyne.
How many times am I going to say Cloyne?
And have a nice little glass of tar water, which I think is pine tar that's been... Okay, can I tell you about...
This is the main thing. And we're going to diagnose how it poisoned this person's brain, where he became...
A lot of philosophers in this sort of early modern area have a pineal gland moment, right?
What's early modern, just for listeners?
I don't do
because if you talk to normal humans and you go the early modern period, they go, what, the 1970s?
Yes, I signed on to teach an early modern course thinking maybe a little bit of Dadaism.
Do some
that would be
brutalism,
fun.
yeah.
No, it doesn't mean that.
No, it means the late 17th century, doesn't it?
I know who is early modern. The early modern period is 1500 to 1800.
Does it begin with a defenestration?
I know what that word means.
Throwing someone through a window.
Oh.
I can't remember which historical period it is that is marked with the second or third defenestration of Prague. There's always people getting thrown out of windows in Prague, and one of them starts the 30 Years' War and one of them ends it, or something like that. I can't remember. It's like ceremonial.
Oh.
I declare peace. Yoink. Sorry, listeners, I've used the wrong word. Gen Z people are like, I declare peace. Yeet.
Yes, yeet. Very good. Very good. Okay, new podcast rule. Don't stand next to a window in Prague.
Yeah.
Especially in a historic period, which we seem to have found ourselves in now. Oh, no. Shall I tell you about his...
Tell me about tar water.
I'll tell you about
I want to get in on tar water.
Okay, so...
Adding it to the list of philosophy drinks along with Canary wines.
Fantastic philosopher. I don't know if he was a particularly good bishop. Maybe he was, but wrote lots of really interesting stuff. Did a lot of work on optics. A bit of a Renaissance man, really, kind of. However,
early modern period's not the Renaissance, listeners, just to be clear.
Christabel doesn't know that. She's not a historian, she's a philosopher. She doesn't know about dates. He spent the last period of his life writing about the benefits of tar water, which is if you get some pine tar and you let it stand in water and then you drink that, talking about the sort of, he thought that it was a panacea. We all have our little whoopsie moment. I have plenty. So does Descartes, so does Berkeley. Anyway, I think that he is particularly relevant because he's more of a verificationist than the verificationists themselves. And that's kind of odd because the logical empiricists would very much ally themselves with all of the materialist commitments. Like, they think that talk of God and moral properties and souls is kind of spooky and unscientific. Yeah. So why would he be more logical empiricist than the logical empiricists? Well, we need to start by thinking about what it is to verify something. It's checking something. Mm-hmm. What do we check using? Well, we have lots of different scientific fancy pieces of equipment. But really, when I'm checking something, even if I am using a fancy piece of equipment like a Geiger counter or something, I'm also using my senses.
Yeah. I could build you something that looks like a Geiger counter and clicks randomly.
Yeah. I would enjoy that, I'm sure.
And then you could go up to things and go, they're radioactive. I've got this thing labelled Geiger counter, and it just clicks sometimes.
That would certainly keep me busy for 30 minutes.
That would screw the verificationists over. It's radioactive. How do you know? Look.
Yeah. And Geiger counter is actually a really good example because I'm using my sight to take a little reading of the number at the top, and I'm also using my hearing. If you don't have any sensory interaction with the outside world, then it's very difficult to do science. And that's not to say that someone like Helen Keller couldn't do science, because she has plenty of sensory interaction with the world. That thing about checking whether the coffee machine is still hot, she could do that. What am I doing when I am checking? Am I literally checking the object, or am I checking my sensory impressions of the object? The coffee machine being hot. When I check that, arguably what I'm doing is checking whether it's giving me a sensory impression of heat. Yeah. There's a sort of veil of ignorance that I can't penetrate through. I can check how it impacts my subjective feelings and senses, but I can't break through to checking the real thing. When I'm perceiving like a Geiger counter or an oven or anything, I don't literally have those things in my head. I just have a set of sensory associations with those things. And you might say something like, well, I could touch it, I could literally make contact with it. But I mean, arguably, we know now that all matter is extremely empty. Are you touching something, or are you feeling the force of repulsion? Also, did I hypnotize you while you were asleep so that you feel heat when you touch it, even if it's not there? The problem of hallucinations is going to be massive for the verificationists, right? You're absolutely right. Cool. What if I rubbed something on it which isn't really hot, but it gives you the sensation of heat? Indeed, you could put deep heat on the coffee maker. Deep heat. Yes, you rub it and you're like, oh, it's so hot, but it's not hot. It really gives you the sensation of heat. So, yeah. So you might say, look, I've got this warehouse full of inordinately complex pieces of scientific equipment. I could do these experiments into the physical microstructures of things. But if you're reading those instruments with your senses, then really what you're doing is you're checking your sensory impressions and not the
Yeah.
objects themselves.
And most scientific equipment doesn't directly measure the thing that it says it's measuring. A Geiger counter doesn't actually measure radioactivity, it measures ionization.
Oh.
So when the radioactive things hit whatever it is that's in it, it creates negative and positive charges, and that's what the clicks are. So other things that are ionizing that aren't radiation
Well, yeah,
make it click.
absolutely. And because of the sort of like physical structure of reality, you're always going to be causally downstream of the thing. So
Yeah.
are you checking the thing, or are you checking that the effects that the
Yeah.
thing has?
Yeah.
Good. I mean, all real problems. And Berkeley sees this and he says, well, if you're a verificationist, you say that you shouldn't believe in anything that you can't check. Well, the only thing that you can check is your own mental states.
Yep.
In that case, the only thing that you should believe in are your own mental states.
Yeah.
Hence, idealism.
Even those, though.
Well, okay. So I could be having lots of hallucinations,
Yeah.
but it's true that I'm having, a visual impression of
Okay,
you.
fine. Yeah.
But I think this is a good thing to point out.
I am sad. No, you're not. You're hungry. Eats food. You were right.
True. But it's kind of funny, right? Because, and I think we've kind of talked about this in an earlier episode, but if you meet somebody who says something like, oh, I don't believe in anything that I don't have direct evidence for, actually, well, you can kind of paint them into this corner of like, well, you must disagree with most of science, because science
Yeah.
assumes that there's this mind-independent world out there. And if you are a being with a mind, you cannot have direct evidence of mind-independent things.
That sort of thinking was dealt with very well in a lecture I had at university, where the lecturer just said, so at the end of this, are you leaving the lecture theatre on the second floor by the door or the window?
Oh.
Because you do not have any completely tested and verified information about which is the safe way to leave.
I thought he was going to say something about the like ontological statements about facts.
I think he was really trying to say something about don't believe that science is all deduction based. It has to be
Induction.
inference based. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because otherwise then you couldn't make a decision. Do I leave through a second floor window or do I leave through the door?
Oh, yeah, you'd absolutely be stymied if all you had were the basic logical principles,
Yeah.
right? Because you just have a load of tautologies that wouldn't help you.
Yeah.
I need to get to Steve's this morning. Well, I know that if something's possibly true, it's necessarily true that it's possibly true. Yeah, great, but...
So I don't know where he lives. Yeah.
There's so much guesswork that you've got to do in real life, but also in any sort of discipline. Okay. And Berkeley is kind of like the verificationists in another sense, because he also says that a lot of statements that we commonly assent to actually don't have meaning.
Yeah.
So remember that the verificationists say, oh, if you can't verify something, any statement that you make about it isn't meaningful. Well, Berkeley would say, if you talk about the world as if it's mind independent, you're not talking about something meaningful, because when we talk about tables or trees or chairs, what we mean are perceived tables or trees or chairs.
Yep.
He says that it's not even intelligible to talk about things that are purely mind independent, things that have never been thought about or perceived. And you could reply something like, well, I could imagine a chair that has never been perceived. Maybe it just sort of coalesces, all right. And Berkeley would say, yeah, maybe you're imagining a chair that's never been perceived, but you're not imagining a chair that's never been thought about, are you?
Nice.
Is that the one sentence asshole thing
Yeah.
coming back?
Yeah.
Maybe. He calls this his master argument, or it's been called the master argument.
But
It's
are you
compelling.
not thinking now?
Exactly.
A
Exactly.
little bit more tar water.
So it might be kind of thought that idealism is sort of a pessimistic view, right? A lot of our everyday talk isn't as meaningful as we thought it was. And also, I can only have direct introspective access to my own mental states.
Yes.
What we were saying before about punching, I can't have direct introspective access to your mental states, as we found out from the What It's Like to Be a Dog episode, right?
Think of the paper you could write. What's it like to punch a bat?
The long-awaited sequel to Thomas Nagel's.
Yeah, that
classic.
would be a really solid paper. But then the counter argument, the what's it like to be a bat that is being punched?
Oh, yeah.
Much harder to write.
Much harder to write.
You haven't got direct access.
I haven't got direct access. And then I'd have all of the non-verificationists being like, that was wrong, you shouldn't have punched the bat. And I'll say, well, you're just saying it in an angry tone of voice.
I'm looking forward to the paper, This is What It's Like to Be a Bat, written by a bat.
Written by Man-Bat.
Yeah.
Okay, but to go back to this, I don't know what it's like for you to have your subjective experiences. Well, if all I'm assenting to are the things that I have direct evidence of, well, this points us to a view known as solipsism.
Yes.
This view that only my mind exists. And
this is main character syndrome taken to its logical extreme end.
I think
Only
so.
character syndrome.
Only character syndrome.
Yeah. Also being a small child.
Really,
exactly
you think?
Yeah. It's a thing that you really have to work with young children on, is the concept that other people are people. They're not just machines for bringing you things.
I know that children don't work out that other individuals have internal lives.
Ever. If you've met many of the adults I've met, listeners.
I think I was 21. No. But I think, isn't there that test where if you have a ball and you put it under one box and then you ask, so if you have a child?
Yeah, it's,
I can't remember.
It's the theory of mind test. It's very contested.
Oh, is it? I thought you would say that.
It's another one of these ones where you can go, oh, and the child is incapable of thinking from another person's blah, 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 blah. But if you then, a lot of cases, if you sit the child down and get them to take you through their mental reasoning, it's not as simple as the researchers who declared this a great finding think it is.
Also, I remember thinking that everyone older than me was a huge authority, and of course they would have access to all of the information, even if I wasn't sure how they would know. And then my parents would often say like, oh, you know, if you take the cookie, I'll know, even though there was no way for them to know. So, I mean, if we sort of get children to think, oh yeah, the adults around you, they have eyes in the backs of their heads, they'll know all of the, don't lie because they'll know anyway. Yeah, I agree. Often the things that scientific theories purport to show you aren't the things that they're showing you at all. For what it's worth, though, I find solipsism terrifying. I think if I was to genuinely find out that the world was like that and that I was alone with a collection of my own mental states, yeah, I think I would turn in my library card, you know, in Minecraft. I would, I wouldn't, because it makes everything zero stakes. Yeah, terrifying thought, solipsism. But it's worth noting that Berkeley didn't actually believe in solipsism.
No, of course not. Because he had all those friends who were bishops. He doesn't want to come up with a theory that wipes all of his mates out of existence.
Yeah, true.
He's part of a community.
Indeed, indeed. He thinks that we can infer the existence of other minds. He thinks that other people's mental processes can have a sort of impact on you. To use his terms, he says the kind of mental processes of others excite us. And I think he kind of means excite in the same way that, you know, electrons can get excited. The way that you think, the way that you combine ideas, the way that you change your ideas, they can kind of shake up the people around you.
Yeah, I think empirically I can prove the existence of other minds pretty simply by just reading a book. Because I've tried to write a book and they're dog shit. But sometimes I read a book and I think this is incredible. I could never have written this.
Right, yes, exactly.
And so if my imagination was capable of coming up with this incredible book, why, if I sit down with a laptop, is my imagination not capable of coming up with a great book? Other minds must exist.
Yeah, why would I have hallucinated all of these other people being brilliant at things that I myself can't do, given that I must actually truly be good at those things if I'm hallucinating other people coming up with them? Yeah, perfect proof. No notes. In fact, I would say that Berkeley's idealism is kind of optimistic, if anything, because he defends this view that Margaret Dowler Wilson calls phenomenal realism. And also, to go back to the What It's Like to Be a Dog episode, remember phenomenal just means like how something feels.
Yeah.
So like the phenomenal character of redness is just how redness feels. And what phenomenal realism essentially means is you just can't be wrong about objects.
Yeah.
So imagine that I am perceiving something that currently nobody else is perceiving.
Oh, yeah.
Let's say that it's a red square. Well, it's impossible for me to be wrong about it because to be perceived is to exist, according to Berkeley's idealism. So it would be really silly for you to say, oh, that thing that you thought was red is actually not red, because it's like I give it properties by thinking about it in a certain way. Now, that isn't to say that you and I can't disagree about something. If you were to then start perceiving my red square and you were to genuinely perceive it as blue...
That's a different thought experiment, though, isn't it?
Well, I mean...
Because the whole thought experiment was only you've seen it.
Indeed.
Once I've seen it, that's a different thing.
But if we disagree, I think we could
Yeah.
kind of make it... I think we could make these two properties compatible, just red to me, blue to you. I think that would be fine. So, to return to the question and to kind of pose the question against a different theoretical backdrop, I think that if we are assuming that the only thing in existence are mind-dependent ideas, if we don't have, tables and chairs and statues, but just ideas of tables and statues, etc., if I'm not perceiving something, then it shouldn't exist, which means that when I'm not perceiving or thinking about things, like, for example, when I go to sleep, well, perhaps it would make more sense to say that everything vanishes, right? Maybe this world exploding posit actually makes your ontology simpler. But Berkeley's idealism is actually going to surprise us again, because he actually doesn't say this. He doesn't think that the world vanishes as soon as you stop looking. He thinks that it stays there because there's nothing that is such that isn't being perceived by anyone, because there's always a particular someone who is watching. Who's that someone?
Santa Claus.
Yeah, well, depending on which denomination.
The Blorons.
The Blorons. Okay, and there's this really fun summary of the problem of how to account for these unperceived objects and Berkeley's response. And it's given in 2 limerick verses, and I thought it was so fun that I would just read them out. Here goes. There was a young man who said God must think it exceedingly odd if he finds that the tree continues to be when no one's about in the quad. That's the problem. Second verse, the response.
You wouldn't put a tree in a quad. The roots would damage the buildings all around it. That's why it's always glass, listeners.
Very true, very true. Dear sir, your astonishment's odd. I am always about in the quad, and that's where the tree continues to be, since observed by yours faithfully, God. Does the world explode when you fall asleep, only to kind of reform itself when you are capable of perceiving it again? Well, not according to Bishop George Berkeley, because God never takes his eye off the ball, which means that the ball never stops existing. But if you're an idealist who doesn't believe in God, or if you're an idealist who doesn't believe in an omniscient God, well, then maybe you could believe in the world exploding posit, and maybe that posit would actually make your theory simpler. Now, of course, you're going to have to deal with this kind of problem that when you look back, the world exhibits this astounding regularity with how it was in the past. But listen, all ontologies have costs, and an idealist like Berkeley might say something along the lines of, well, if you're going to be a materialist, you've got to believe in this mind-independent world that is just out there and existing despite, and you've got to commit to it if you're a materialist, despite the fact that you never have direct evidence of it. I mean, it's just a case of weighing costs, I suppose. Maybe I am being a middleist here. Maybe I am being an everybody's right here. Maybe I'm not, actually. But what I sort of want to leave the listener with here is this, I guess, ontological exercise in picking your own adventure. Like, what feels more costly to you? Use your unruined intuitions, although I suppose if you've listened to this podcast regularly thus far, maybe your intuitions too will have been a little bit ruined. We're
gonna damage your minds to the extent that you end up substance dependent, like most philosophers. The substance here being tar water.
Too close to the bone. Yeah, let's all go and have a lovely glass of tar water, everybody. I hear it's really good for just about everything. Literal picking your poison, ontological cost, and pine tar that's been suspended in solution for a little while.
And listeners, if a small child says to you, does the whole world explode when I go to sleep? The correct answer to give them is no, because I'm still awake when you go to sleep, because I'm not allowed to go to bed until you are asleep. And I think I would have noticed.
You're God in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, isn't God just an extension of the concept of the Father, but taking blah, blah, blah,
no,
blah,
you
blah,
really
blah,
are
blah,
going back into Hume
blah,
now.
blah, 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 blah.
This isn't a psychology podcast now, Steve.
No. Listeners, I think there's only one way that we can end this podcast, and that is to say, sleep well.
Night, night, listeners. Bye.
Hopefully everything will be back in the morning. I sad, or do I just need a burger? Would you make me a burger?
Oh, it's
I would love you forever, even if you were a worm. If you were a worm that brought me a burger.